I heard my wife declared we had a dead bedroom to control intimacy. I unmasked her jealous ownership, exposed manipulation, and filed for divorce. "We have a dead bedroom situation," she'd say, like she was diagnosing a broken appliance. "It's not personal. It's just where we are right now, right? Not personal. Just two people who supposedly loved each other, living like roommates who split the bills." The thing is, I believed her at first. I actually thought maybe this was some kind of phase couples went through. Maybe the stress from her job. Maybe we'd gotten too comfortable. Maybe we needed to work on our connection. So I tried everything: date nights, surprise gestures, taking on more household responsibilities. I figured if I could just remove the stress from her life, maybe she'd remember why she married me in the first place. But months turned into more months, and the excuses kept coming. Too tired, too stressed, not in the mood, dealing with work drama, headaches, early morning, tomorrow, always something. And always followed by that same phrase, dead bedroom. Like saying it somehow made it official and unchangeable. I started paying closer attention to when she actually seemed alive and energetic. Funny thing, she had plenty of energy for her girls' nights out, plenty of energy for social media, for shopping trips, for long phone calls with her sister. She could laugh, joke around, stay up late binge-watching shows. But the moment I showed any romantic interest, suddenly she was this fragile, exhausted person who needed space. The breaking point came when I suggested we see a counselor. You'd think someone genuinely concerned about saving their marriage would jump at the chance to get professional help. Instead, she got defensive, started turning it around on me, saying I was putting too much pressure on her, that I was making her feel guilty for not being in the mood. "You're being selfish," she told me one night after I'd brought up how we hadn't been intimate in over 2 months. "A dead bedroom doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. Maybe you need to examine why you're so focused on that one aspect of our relationship." That's when I realized something crucial. This wasn't about stress or fatigue or any medical condition. This was about control. She was using intimacy as a weapon, withholding it to maintain power in our relationship, and she'd found the perfect modern excuse to justify it. I stopped trying after that conversation. Stopped initiating, stopped suggesting date nights, stopped pretending this was some temporary rough patch we'd work through together. If she wanted a roommate instead of a husband, fine, I'd give her exactly what she was asking for. What I didn't expect was how much that decision would change everything. Because when you stop chasing someone who clearly doesn't want to be caught, you start noticing other things, like how other women actually respond when you talk to them, how they smile, how they engage, how they make you feel like you're worth their time and attention. And that's exactly what happened when our new neighbor moved in next door. The moving truck showed up on a Saturday morning. I was outside washing my car when I noticed the new neighbor directing the movers. She was probably in her early 30s, confident in the way she handled herself, and had this natural ease about her that you noticed right away. When she saw me, she walked over with a genuine smile, not the polite neighbor smile most people give, but something warmer. "Hi there. Looks like we're going to be neighbors. Hope I'm not disrupting your peaceful weekend with all this chaos." Her voice had this slight rasp to it, like she'd just woken up, but she was clearly wide awake and energetic. She introduced herself, and we started talking about the neighborhood, local restaurants, the best grocery stores, normal neighbor conversation, except it felt different. She actually listened when I talked, asked follow-up questions, laughed at my jokes. "You've got great timing with the car wash," she said, looking at my freshly cleaned vehicle. "I'm hoping to find someone around here who knows a good mechanic. This move has been rough on my car." I recommended the shop I'd been using for years, and she pulled out her phone to save the information. "You're already being more helpful than my last neighbors ever were. They lived next to me for 3 years, and I don't think we exchanged more than 10 words. That's when I realized how long it had been since someone had actually appreciated something I did, not just acknowledged it, but genuinely seemed grateful. When I told my wife about helpful things I'd done around the house, she'd usually just nod and move on. This woman acted like I'd just solved a major problem for her. Over the next few weeks, we'd run into each other outside regularly. She'd be getting her mail when I was leaving for work, or she'd be coming home from a jog when I was mowing the lawn. Always a smile, always a real conversation, not just the "how's it going" nonsense most people default to. She had this way of making every interaction feel worth having. When she asked about my day, she actually waited for the answer. When I mentioned something about work, she'd remember it and ask about it later. She made me feel like what I had to say mattered. One evening, she was struggling with some heavy boxes on her porch. I offered to help and she accepted gratefully. As we were moving them inside, she said, "Your wife is so lucky to have someone who just jumps in to help without being asked." I almost laughed at that. Lucky? If only she knew how my offers to help at home were usually met with, "I can handle it myself," or "You'll just do it wrong anyway." "She's working late again tonight," I said, which was true. My wife had been pulling longer hours lately, or at least that's what she claimed. "Well, her loss is my gain," she said with a grin. "I'll take all the help I can get. You want a beer? It's the least I can do." We sat on her porch for about an hour talking about everything and nothing. She was funny, smart, and had this way of making observations about people that showed she really paid attention to the world around her. When she laughed at something I said, it wasn't the polite chuckle my wife gave me. It was genuine, like she actually found me entertaining. The whole time we were talking, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was what normal interaction was supposed to feel like. Easy, natural, mutual. No walking on eggshells. No wondering if I was saying the wrong thing. No feeling like I was interrupting something more important. When I finally went home that night, my wife was already in bed scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up when I came in. "Where were you?" she asked, not really sounding interested in the answer. "Helping the new neighbor move some boxes." We talked for a bit. She said, already back to her phone. "Don't stay up too late. I need to sleep." That was it. No curiosity about the new neighbor. No interest in what we talked about. No acknowledgement that I'd spent my evening helping someone, just a reminder that my presence might interfere with her sleep. I lay there that night thinking about the difference between the two conversations I'd had that day. One left me feeling appreciated and valued. The other left me feeling like an inconvenience in my own home. And that's when I started to understand something important about myself. I wasn't asking for too much. I wasn't being unreasonable. I was just a man who wanted to feel like he mattered to the person who was supposed to matter most to him. The neighbor was showing me what that felt like, and my wife was about to find out what she'd been missing. The shift happened on a Wednesday evening. I was outside grilling dinner when my neighbor came home from work. She parked in her driveway and walked over to the fence between our yards. "That smells incredible," she said, loosening her tie. She worked some corporate job that required professional dress, but she always managed to make it look effortless. "You're making me realize how sad my dinner plans are. I was going to heat up leftover takeout. I always make too much anyway," I said, flipping the steaks. "You're welcome to join us if you want." She smiled that genuine smile again. "That's really sweet of you, but I don't want to intrude on your family time." "Trust me, you wouldn't be intruding on anything," I said. And there was probably more truth in that statement than I should have let slip. That's when I noticed my wife watching from the kitchen window. She'd been home for over an hour but hadn't even acknowledged that I was cooking dinner. Now, suddenly, she was paying attention. My neighbor noticed too. She waved toward the window, and my wife gave a tight little wave back before disappearing from view. "Your wife seems nice," she said. But I caught something in her tone, like she was being polite but had already formed her own opinion. "She has her moments," I said, which was about as diplomatic as I could manage. We talked for a few more minutes about work, the weather, nothing heavy, but the whole time I could feel eyes on us from inside the house. When my neighbor finally went inside, I stayed outside to clean the grill and enjoy the peace. That's when my wife appeared. She stepped onto the patio wearing a sundress I hadn't seen in months, her hair down instead of in the messy bun she usually wore around the house. "Dinner ready?" she asked, and there was something different in her voice, something I hadn't heard in a long time. "Yeah, just finished," I said, wondering what had prompted this sudden transformation. She moved closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Perfume? When was the last time she'd worn perfume at home? "You know, I've been thinking we don't spend enough quality time together." I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to figure out what game this was. "Quality time, she said, running her finger along my arm. "Maybe after dinner we could reconnect." Reconnect. 3 hours ago she'd given me the dead bedroom speech when I tried to kiss her goodbye before work. Now she wanted to reconnect because I'd had a 5-minute conversation with the neighbor. "What happened to our dead bedroom situation?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Oh, that? I think maybe I was just stressed. You know how work has been lately, right? Work stress that magically disappeared the moment another woman showed interest in her husband." During dinner, she was different, attentive, flirty, asking about my day like she actually cared about the answer. She kept touching my hand, leaning in when she talked, giving me looks that used to make my heart race. But now I was analyzing every gesture, every word. This wasn't genuine desire. This was competition. This was a woman who'd been taking her husband for granted, suddenly realizing that other women might not. After dinner, she suggested we watch a movie together, not just any movie, but one of the romantic comedies she used to claim gave her unrealistic expectations about relationships. She curled up next to me on the couch, something she hadn't done in months. "This is nice," she said, running her fingers through my hair. "We should do this more often." "Should we?" I asked. "I thought you were too tired for this kind of thing." "I'm never too tired for you," she said, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Never too tired for me? She'd been too tired for me every night for the past 3 months. The next morning, she was up early making coffee, wearing one of those little nightgowns that used to drive me crazy. She handed me a cup and kissed my cheek like we were newlyweds. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe we should plan a weekend getaway, just the two of us. It's been too long since we've had real alone time." A weekend getaway from the woman who'd been claiming we had a dead bedroom and needed space to figure things out, all because she'd seen her husband having a normal conversation with an attractive neighbor. "What's really going on here?" I asked, setting down my coffee. "What do you mean?" "Yesterday morning you told me you needed space and weren't ready to work on our intimacy issues. Last night you're suddenly interested in reconnecting. This morning you want to plan romantic getaways. What changed?" She looked uncomfortable for the first time since this whole performance began. "I told you, I think I was just stressed." "Can a wife want to be close to her husband?" "A wife can," I said. "But usually that desire doesn't appear overnight just because the neighbor lady smiled at him." Her face changed. The sweet, flirty expression disappeared, replaced by something harder. "Is that what you think this is about?" "I think you've been taking me for granted," I said calmly. "And now you're worried that maybe you shouldn't have." She stared at me for a long moment, probably trying to decide whether to keep up the act or drop it entirely. Finally she said, "She was flirting with you." There it was, the real reason for her sudden transformation, not because she missed me or realized what she'd been doing to our marriage, but because another woman had shown interest in what she'd been neglecting. "And that bothers you?" I asked. "Of course, it bothers me. You're my husband." "Funny," I said. "I've been your husband this whole time. Where was this possessiveness when you were telling me we had a dead bedroom?" The mask slipped completely. She couldn't answer that question without admitting what we both knew. She didn't want me, but she didn't want anyone else to have me either. And that's when I realized something that would change everything. My wife's sudden interest in saving our marriage had nothing to do with love and everything to do with ownership. I decided to stop playing games. That evening I sat her down and laid everything out on the table. "We need to talk about what's really happening here," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "And I want honest answers, not whatever performance you've been putting on since yesterday." She tried to maintain her newfound sweet demeanor. "I don't know what you mean. I'm just trying to—" I held up my hand. 3 months ago you told me we had a dead bedroom. 2 months ago you said you needed space to figure things out. Last month you suggested I was being selfish for wanting intimacy with my own wife. Yesterday you saw me talking to the neighbor, and suddenly you're ready to book romantic getaways. You really think I'm stupid enough not to connect those dots?" Her face flushed, but she still tried to deflect. "You're reading too much into this. I've been doing some thinking about our relationship and I realized." "You realized what exactly? That you actually love me? That you've been wrong about the dead bedroom? Or that you don't like other women appreciating what you've been throwing away?" She went quiet for a moment, then tried a different approach. "Look, maybe I have been distant lately. Work stress, you know how it is. But that doesn't mean I don't care about our marriage." "Work stress," I repeated. "That's interesting. Because your work stress never seemed to affect your energy for girls' nights out, never stopped you from staying up late scrolling through social media, never prevented you from planning shopping trips or weekend visits with your sister. Funny how that stress only hit when your husband wanted to connect with you." She shifted uncomfortably. "That's different. Those things help me relax, and intimacy with your husband doesn't." She didn't have an answer for that, so I kept going. "Here's what I think really happened. You got comfortable. You figured I'd always be here, always be available, always be waiting for whatever scraps of attention you felt like giving me. You turned our bedroom into a battlefield where you held all the power, and it worked, didn't it? For months I played along. I believed your excuses, made allowances for your stress, convinced myself that if I just tried harder you'd remember why you married me." Her jaw tightened. I never said you had to. But then something unexpected happened. Another woman looked at your husband and saw value. She smiled at me, enjoyed talking to me, appreciated my help, and suddenly you realized that maybe I'm not as desperate as you thought. Maybe I have options. Maybe other women would actually want what you've been rejecting. That's exactly what this is. I leaned forward. You don't want me. You've made that crystal clear for months, but you don't want anyone else to have me either. So now you're scrambling to mark your territory. She stood up, anger finally breaking through her fake sweetness. How dare you accuse me of using intimacy as a weapon, of withholding affection to control me, of only showing interest when you thought you might lose your hold over me? I stood up too, but kept my voice level. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm stating facts. You're twisting everything around, she said, but her voice was shaking now. I'm trying to save our marriage, and you're attacking me for it. Save our marriage? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You spent months killing our marriage. You told me we had a dead bedroom like it was some kind of terminal diagnosis. You made me feel like I was wrong for wanting my wife to actually want me. You turned me into a stranger in my own home. I never meant. You meant every word of it. Until you saw that neighbor smile at me. Until you realized that other women don't see me as a burden or an inconvenience. Until you figured out that maybe you've been taking something valuable for granted. She tried to compose herself, switching tactics again. Okay, maybe I have been taking you for granted. Maybe I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. But isn't that what matters? That I see it now? That I want to fix it? No, I said simply. What matters is why you want to fix it. And we both know it's not because you suddenly love me more. It's because you're afraid you might lose your control over me. That's not true. Prove it. She blinked. What? Prove it. If this is really about love, and not about competition, then it shouldn't matter what the neighbor does or doesn't do. Your feelings for me should be independent of whether other women find me attractive. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm going to keep being a good neighbor. I'm going to keep having normal conversations with normal people who treat me like a human being worth talking to. And you're going to figure out whether you actually want to be married to me, or whether you just want to own me. You can't give me an ultimatum, she said, but her voice had lost its fight. I'm not giving you an ultimatum. I'm giving you clarity. For months you've been telling me what you don't want. Now I'm telling you what I won't accept. I won't accept a marriage where affection is rationed based on how threatened you feel. I won't accept a wife who only wants me when she thinks someone else might. She stared at me, probably trying to process the fact that her husband had just refused to play her game anymore. I need time to think, she said finally. Take all the time you need, I said. But understand something. I'm done begging for scraps from my own wife. I'm done pretending that a dead bedroom is something that just happens instead of something you choose. And I'm done accepting that I should be grateful for whatever attention you decide to give me. She left the room without another word. But I could see in her face that she finally understood something important. The man she'd been taking for granted wasn't going to be taken for granted anymore, and that terrified her more than losing me ever could. For the next few days, she tried every trick in the book. First came the silent treatment, which honestly was a relief after months of her complaints and excuses. Then she switched to playing the victim, telling me I was being cruel and unreasonable. All I did was try to reconnect with you, she said one morning, tears in her eyes. And you turned it into this whole conspiracy theory. All you did, I repeated calmly, was panic when you realized your husband might actually be worth something to someone else. The tears dried up pretty quickly when she realized they weren't working. Next came the bargaining phase. Offers to go to counseling, to work on our communication, to plan that romantic getaway she'd mentioned. She even suggested we should renew our vows, which would have been laughable if it weren't so pathetic. I know I've made mistakes, she said. But isn't marriage about forgiveness, about working through problems together? It is, I agreed, but it's also about respect, and you've shown me exactly how much respect you have for me. She tried guilt next, reminded me about our history, our wedding day, all the good times we'd shared. She talked about what people would think if we separated, about how divorce would affect our families. Is this really what you want? She asked. To throw away everything we've built together? I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm refusing to accept less than I deserve. When guilt didn't work, she got angry, really angry. The mask came off completely. You think you're so much better than me? She snapped. You think that neighbor actually cares about you? She's just being friendly. You're reading into it because you're desperate for attention. Maybe I am desperate for attention, I said. From my wife. That's kind of the point of being married. Oh, spare me the self-pity. You act like I'm some monster because I wasn't in the mood for a few months. A few months? I stared at her. It's been almost a year since you've shown me any genuine affection. And it wasn't about being in the mood. It was about power, about keeping me in line. She laughed bitterly. Power? You think I was trying to control you? That's ridiculous. Is it? Then explain why you suddenly wanted to reconnect the moment another woman smiled at me. Explain why the dead bedroom miraculously cured itself when you felt threatened. She couldn't, so she tried to turn it around on me. Maybe the problem is that you're the kind of man who gets flattered by the first woman who pays attention to him. Maybe you're the one who can't be trusted. You're right, I said, and she looked surprised. I can't be trusted to keep accepting scraps from someone who doesn't value me. I can't be trusted to pretend that a marriage without intimacy is normal. And I can't be trusted to stay with someone who only wants me when she thinks someone else might. That's when she played her final card. She broke down completely, sobbing about how she'd been struggling with depression, how work stress had affected her more than she'd realized, how she was afraid of losing me, but didn't know how to fix things. I love you, she cried. I know I haven't shown it well, but I do love you. Please don't give up on us. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered all the times I'd tried to talk to her about our problems. All the times she'd dismissed my concerns. All the times she'd made me feel like I was asking for too much. If you love me, I said, then you'll understand why I can't accept a love that only shows up when you're afraid of losing control. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. So that's it? You're just going to walk away? I'm going to walk away from being treated like I'm lucky to get whatever attention you decide to give me. I'm walking away from a marriage where I have to compete with a neighbor for my wife's interest. I'm walking away from someone who weaponized our bedroom and then acted like it was my fault. But what about counseling? What about working through this? We could try counseling, I said. But first you'd have to admit that there's actually a problem. And you'd have to want to change because you value our marriage, not because you're afraid of losing your hold over me. She wiped her eyes. And for a moment I thought she might actually get it, that she might realize what she'd been doing and commit to real change. Instead, she said, fine. If you want to throw away our marriage for some fantasy about the neighbor, go ahead. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. And there it was. Even facing the end of our marriage, she still couldn't admit what she'd done. She still couldn't take responsibility for months of rejection and manipulation. She was still trying to make me the villain in her story. I'm not throwing away our marriage, I said quietly. I'm refusing to accept a fake one. That night, I slept in the guest room, not because she kicked me out, but because I chose to. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully, without wondering what I'd done wrong or how I could fix things. I woke up knowing exactly what I needed to do, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like myself again, the man I'd been before I started accepting less than I deserved. The man who was about to take his life back. I made my decision the next morning, clear-headed, calm, and completely certain. I wasn't going to waste another day in a marriage where I had to earn basic affection from my own wife. I called a lawyer that afternoon, not to be vindictive, but to understand my options and protect myself. I'd spent months trying to save something she'd already killed. Now it was time to make it official. When I got home, she was waiting in the living room, dressed up like she was going somewhere special. She'd done her hair, put on makeup, even wore the dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. I made dinner reservations, she said, forcing a smile. That Italian place you like. I thought we could talk things through properly. There's nothing to talk through, I said. I've made my decision. Her smile faltered. What do you mean? I'm done. I contacted a lawyer today. I'll be filing for divorce. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You're bluffing. I'm not. What? But I've been trying to work on things. I've been making an effort. You've been making an effort to control the situation, I corrected. There's a difference. She started crying again, but this time it felt different, more desperate. Please don't do this. I know I made mistakes, but we can fix this. I can change. You had months to change. You chose not to. Now you want to change because you're facing consequences, not because you actually see what you did wrong. That's not true. Isn't it? Tell me honestly, if the neighbor had never moved in, if she'd never smiled at me, would you still be interested in working on our marriage? Would you still want to reconnect? She opened her mouth, then closed it. We both knew the answer. I didn't think so, I said. Over the next few weeks, she tried everything. She told our friends and family that I was having a midlife crisis, that I was being influenced by the neighbor, that I was throwing away a good marriage over nothing. She painted herself as the victim of a husband who'd suddenly become unreasonable. But I didn't care about her narrative anymore. I knew the truth, and that was enough. The neighbor, meanwhile, had no idea she'd been the catalyst for any of this. She continued being friendly, continued treating me like a human being worth talking to. The contrast between her genuine warmth and my wife's calculated attempts at manipulation became even more obvious. One evening, while I was packing some of my things, my wife made one final attempt. "I know you think I only wanted you back because of her," she said. "But that's not true. Seeing you with someone else just made me realize what I was losing." "No," I said, folding a shirt into the box. "It made you realize you were losing control. There's a difference." "I loved you," she said, using past tense for the first time. "You loved owning me," I replied. "You loved having someone who would always be there no matter how badly you treated him. You loved the security of knowing I'd never leave, no matter how much you neglected me. That's not fair." "Fair?" I stopped packing and looked at her. "You know what's not fair? Telling your husband you have a dead bedroom, and then getting jealous when another woman treats him with basic human kindness. You know what's not fair? Withholding affection for months, and then expecting gratitude when you finally decide to show some interest." She had no response to that. The day I moved out, she stood at the window watching me load my car. I could see her face still beautiful, still the woman I'd fallen in love with years ago. But that woman had been gone for a long time, replaced by someone who saw marriage as a game to be won, rather than a partnership to be nurtured. As I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace, freedom. The knowledge that I'd finally chosen myself over someone else's manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text from her. "You'll regret this. No one else will put up with you like I did." I deleted it without responding. She still didn't get it. She still thought she'd been doing me a favor by staying married to me. She still believed I should be grateful for whatever scraps of attention she'd given me. But I knew something she didn't. I knew what it felt like to be appreciated, to be valued, to be treated like someone worth knowing. The neighbor had reminded me of that without even trying. And I knew that somewhere out there was a woman who wouldn't see loving me as a chore or a burden, someone who wouldn't need the threat of competition to remember why she chose me. Someone who would see the man my wife had taken for granted and recognize his worth. The dead bedroom hadn't been a medical condition or a temporary phase. It had been a choice, her choice. And now I was making mine. I was choosing to be with someone who would choose me back every single day without needing reminders about why I was worth it. The woman who'd spent months claiming we had a dead bedroom discovered something important that day. The bedroom wasn't dead. Her interest in being a real wife was. And the man she'd been taking for granted was very much alive, just not available to her anymore. Some women don't realize what they have until it's gone. Others don't deserve to keep it in the first place. My wife fell into the second category, and I was finally free to find someone who belonged in the first.